Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. I heard Galia Vauthier's voice for the first time emanating from the Bluesberry Cafe in Clarksdale, Mississippi, birthplace of the Delta Blues. I had come to Clarksdale after the Nissan workers had lost their union election in Canton, Mississippi. The music that drew her from busking in the streets of Brussels, Belgium to singing in Clarksdale is a working-class beat. Cotton-picking sharecroppers in the Delta channeled hundreds of years of slavery, oppression, and transcendent spirit to create it. Like jazz and rock, it's created by the working class. This music, this beat, is a powerful, liberating energy and a hell of a lot of fun letting us forget our troubles and dance. Galia's life as a traveling rhythm and blues singer pulsates to that beat.
Kiss me, baby. Ooh, I first go. Hold me, baby. Yeah, I want your love like a lover should. You're fine, so kind. I want to tell it all that to my. I trim my nails and I travel my town. I'm real nervous, but I sure is fun. Come on, baby, drive me crazy. Goodness gracious, great balls of fire. From rockabilly, I discovered rock and roll, a little richer than rhythm and blues, and then I discovered artists a little bit less famous, right, than just Elvis Presley. From Little Richard to Ruth Brown, Laverne Baker, Winona Carr.
I asked Galia about her impressions of America, not just the music, but the socio-political struggle for justice and worker rights.
I hate you guys for having voted Trump, so next time do better. If I live here, the mentality has to evolve. I think people think things can't change. Of course it's not going to change if everybody say that.
Galia says Hillary Clinton was much better than Trump, but she was like an iceberg. Much remained hidden.
Trump, it's not an iceberg, it's like a mountain of bull. You see everything and it's really in front of you and it's big. And I think that's a good last note.
Galia's first album, CD, is Galia and Voodoo Casino. She's teaming up now with Mama's Boys for a new recording out soon on a New Orleans label.
Come on, babe, give that sugar. Come on, babe, where's the trigger?
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit workersindependentnews.com.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Heroes, this is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for tuning in today on the big program. So much to get to. Wow. All of the winning. The winning. My favorite, there are a bunch of quotes yesterday from Trump's little press conference in the Rose Garden with the Prime Minister of Spain, even though he kept calling him the president. My favorite is, all I do is work. All I do is work. Yet we've not had a president who has played golf as often, who has been on vacation as often as this guy. But all he does is work. That's it. And again, I got to question what the definition. What's the definition of work in the Trump world? Now, horribly, you look at what's going on in Puerto Rico, and I've been saying now that this is Trump's Katrina, and the fact that they have no water, no food, and still the administration's just giving it lip service. Well, we're going to show up on Tuesday. Oh, that's going to help. You showing up is going to help. And again, another one of the favorite quotes from yesterday's little conference. And again, this is one of those things that, look, I want my president to be a lot smarter than me. I want my president to be a lot smarter than the average Joe walking up and down the street. Because, look, it is a tough job. As Donald Trump said, who knew? Who knew it could be so difficult? But he was speaking of Puerto Rico, and he says this is an island sitting in the middle of an ocean. Wow. That's generally what an island. Never mind. He says it's a big ocean. It's a very big ocean. Yes, it is, Donald. It is a great big ocean. It's a tremendous ocean. The best ocean ever. He also went on to heap some praise upon the country of Spain, saying, Spain is a great country. God, help us. Oh, are you tired of the winning yet? I mean, honestly and truthfully, are you tired of, all of the... Because you remember during the campaign, we're going to be so tired of winning that we're going to be just tired of it. And you look at the last couple of hours, the Donald not so much winning. His candidate last night in Alabama, the strange Luther, lost. Although Trump, went down there and gave his half-hearted effort to get him elected. Again, it's you got to love how anytime if I were a candidate, I wouldn't bring him anywhere near me. Simply because you have no idea what kind of distraction it's going to be. And the distraction's always going to be away from you and to him. So I don't know how it helps. Anyway, Luther Strange went down to defeat in Alabama, which we're going to talk about today, and how bad that's going to be. Not that Luther was any better, all that great. Still a lot better than the crazy guy that won last night. The ACA repeal is dead. No repeal and replace now, but the tax plan's coming. So possibly another disaster waiting there. There's the possibility of a whole bunch of indictments of people in his administration. The IRS may be looking into his taxes. Finally, we may find out what's in those tax returns. Don't know, but tons of stuff. And the Twitter, he went to the Twitters complaining, we didn't get the repeal and replace. And, saying, look, now we got to get rid of the filibuster. And again, you look at this stuff, and it's really about it's about a child getting his way. And it's really very scary stuff to me. Because look, all of just the 24-hour news cycle, all of the bad things that have happened, the fact that there is a major catastrophe, there are Americans who are struggling, who are literally... CNN showed a nursing home in Puerto Rico where you've got all these people in this 14-floor high-rise up on the roof because there's nowhere to go. And what is our president doing? Well, I'll bet, and this is one of those things, he was asked about Puerto Rico, and he said, it's an island, it's in the middle of the ocean. Yeah, that's what I know. I would bet he doesn't even know that that's a U.S. territory. I would bet, again, that we're linked. And maybe now he's figured it out because now, I guess, next Tuesday he's going to show up. I'll bet he didn't think at all that, that's us. And, it's this kind of scary scenario coming from the White House that there is so much that he doesn't know. And that's really the problem. And what he does know is scary because it divides us. And I look at the victory last night in Alabama as, for Roy Moore, who is the crazy way out. And if you read some of his writings, hello, Christian Sharia law. Yeah, you're coming? Sure. Roy's going to bring it? Absolutely. This is a guy who is a throwback to, not just the 1950s. Let's talk the 1650s. This is one of these puritanical right-wing zealot types who, for the fringe of the Republican Party, who say that, he's not going to pander to the establishment. They're right. He is going to be absolutely crazy. And the question is, when I look at someone like Roy Moore, how much of it is about his pure blind faith, zealot-like ideology, and how much of it is about actually getting anything done? See, because remember, our government does for us and with us what we individually can't do. And to send someone who is literally insane and says, I don't believe in government shouldn't be doing anything, it's the God and the church. You go, really, is this who we want in our halls of power? And, I read his America the Beautiful poem. And if you want to really get a sense of just how out there this guy is, I tweeted it out earlier this morning. Simply to these are the musings of the guy who's going to bring Christian Sharia law to this country. And it's interesting to me, their hatred of Sharia law is only hatred in the fact that it's a Muslim thing. If it were a Christian thing where women have to walk behind barefoot, pregnant, all of that stuff, and let's not get into the gay stuff because wow, I think he would have Monday night executions if he could have his way. This is who the state of Alabama voted to move on to the next round of elections. Now, this is why I think G. Douglas Jones has to be, if Alabama wants to, and I know this is a huge leap, if they want to get out of being the butt of every joke of ignorance and intolerance and racism and ridiculousness, if they want to stop being that butt of the joke, maybe make it South Carolina or Mississippi, this guy cannot be elected. There's just no way Roy Moore can sit in the U.S. Senate. I'm sorry, there's just not. And I reach out to my Alabama friends and say, look, sanity, a little bit. Look, Luther was not, in my estimation, a great choice. He was a Republican, establishment Republican. He was going to go along with the bad ideas. This guy is just crazy. And I fear that we end up continuing down the more crazy path under the guise of he's a good Christian. Scary stuff. So lots to get to, lots of your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Rich McDaniel is going to be here to talk about what the election down there in Alabama means, what it means to Alabama, what it could mean to the country, and what it means to Trump. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people.
Disorder in the house. There's a flaw in the system. And the fly in the ointment's gonna bring the whole thing down. Floodgates are open. We've let the demons loose. The big guns have spoken. And we've fallen for the ruse.
I'm Rick Smith. and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1903. That was the day that is remembered in Virginia as the wreck of Old 97. Old 97, also known as the Fast Mail, was a Southern Railway freight train. It carried the U.S. mail from Washington, D.C. to Atlanta, Georgia. The train wreck happened on the leg of the trip from Monroe, Virginia to Spencer, North Carolina. The train had come in late to Monroe. It was reported that the railway company ordered the engineer to increase the speed of the train to make up time. The company had to pay a penalty if they delivered the mail late. But when the train neared Danville, Virginia, the tracks curved at the Stillhouse Trestle Bridge. The speed was simply too much. Despite the engineer's efforts to slow the train, it careened off the tracks and plummeted to the rocky ravine 45 feet below. 11 of the 16 people on board the train died, including the conductor, the engineer, and the flagmen and both firemen. The railway company blamed the wreck on the deceased engineer. Newspapers across the country carried photos of the wreck. The disaster became the subject of multiple ballads. One version, by Vernon Dalhart in 1924, is thought to be the first million-selling country record in U.S. history. Johnny Cash recorded another well-known version of the song. In 1993, an alternative country band took the name the Old 97s, hearkening back to the disaster and the songs it inspired.
They gave him his orders at Monroe, Virginia. Said, Steve, you're way behind time. This is not 38, this is old 97. You must put her into Spencer on time.
For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day,
where family values are more than slogans. The Rick Smith Show.
All because the gays are getting married, that is why people die and children go unfed. When I'm sad and alone, and I'm wondering just why everything about my life is feeling like it's going down a toilet bowl. It's good to know it's 'cause the gays.
Oh yeah, that was a campaign slogan right there. We can see that coming up before the December 12th election, and hopefully the people of Alabama, as I said, a bit of sanity, please. No thanks on the Christian Sharia law. But here's the thing. You had the Donald last night evidently go and tweet delete crazy, because, you remember on Friday he went, did the little rally that got a touch of attention, where he was, I don't know if that was a full-throated support of Luther Strange, but it was a support. He had thrown out some tweets. Evidently, we're deleting those now. And I go, with friends like this, who needs anything else? Anyway, here to talk about what last night has brought us in the form of Roy Moore as the Senate candidate down there in Alabama. I've asked Rich McDaniel to come talk with us, former Clinton campaign person. Rich, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So, I look at this last night, this victory by Roy Moore, not good in my view. This is a guy who would, in my view, would bring us a Christian version of Sharia law if he could tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Just it's point blank, Roy Moore is dangerously unfit for the office.
And so, you hear that, and I've heard that frame. Why do you think that?
Well, in a sense of him thinking that Sharia law, in his eyes, is American law. It is founded on religious concepts, but also just his incendiary comments. Not only the fact of Sharia law, but how he identifies people based off their color skin, and how he's openly against LGBTQ issues. This is a gentleman who was a Supreme Court justice who was removed from the seat twice. Let's get this clear. He was removed from the seat twice. That shows you that he cannot have a bias when it comes to actually being there for the people of Alabama, let alone the people of the United States.
What do you say to the people, Rich, who agree with you? He was taken off the Supreme Court, but he ended up getting back because people voted him back in. What does that say about the folks of Alabama?
It doesn't really say too much about the folks at Alabama. Let's talk. I mean, Alabama is football, faith, and family. I mean, and it might be in that order. They are just voting for the norm of what they think is right, but they really don't realize how their issues are affected when they put someone in office like Roy Moore, who really doesn't really care about the issues, but speaks to more of a societal base of, LGBT issues and religious factors, but not what affects your pocketbooks and what affects your children in the schools. And so, we ask and we hope and we try to find the right way to talk to those individuals about how we can put someone in office that actually cares about what you truly believe in, but what actually affects your livelihood, your quality of life, your quality of service.
So the argument, because I've had people tell me, well, the Jones campaign wanted Moore because he's the extreme. And, maybe the people of Alabama don't want to be the butt of every joke nationally by having a caricature in the Senate. I'm curious your thoughts if that's a winning strategy.
I wouldn't say that the people on the Jones team wanted Roy Moore. I think they want to highlight and show that, here's someone right now who is spewing hate, and we are not about that. I mean, the people of Alabama, I spent a lot of time in that state. I'm from Georgia. I'm a Southerner, born and bred. And the people of Alabama are very prideful, but they're great people. They, to fellowship with them, if you want to use that, that faith term on each and every day, you learn about them. And to show and highlight Roy Moore as who he is, and to show the contrast to Jones, who's an everyday, true, born-bred, blue Alabama person, just like Roy Moore, works in his favor. Look at the two contrasts. I mean, Jones is someone who stepped up to the plate to prosecute, Klansmen for the 16th Baptist Church bombing. So in a sense, you want to just highlight that we are real Americans here, believe in the same thing, but we want to make sure that we're looking out for all of Alabama and not just, a select few.
I've had some people, email me say, well, he's the racist candidate. Is that fair? Is that unfair, I guess?
Is that fair? Is unfair? He's a candidate for hate. Let's put it that way.
And define that.
He is someone who spews. You know how to walk a fine line, but he spews disdain and displeasure for others. He only cares of us a selfish mind state. What I think about to call them racist, yeah, you can call them racist. But what does that change? We have to kind of pinpoint the things and make people realize and open their eyes to the issues that really matter. Just call him racist and not support facts behind that, or show how the words and the ideology that he stands about does nothing to help the citizens of Alabama or help the people of the United States. That's what we want to focus on. Like we can jump on, race is at the forefront now. We can credit that to, having President Obama be the first African American president. Well, it incited that. It's a hard topic to talk about. It's a difficult topic to talk about, particularly for those who are uncomfortable because they fear it. They don't know it. They don't understand it. But we have to continue to have that conversation so people can get comfortable to understand that, hey, just because someone's skin color is different from yours doesn't mean that they're different from you. And I don't think Roy Moore has really quite grasped that during his time on this earth.
Yeah, I mean, I said earlier that it's not just that Moore wants to take us back to the 50s, not the 1950s. He wants to take us back to the 1650s in some of the thinking that this extreme. And look, I'm not against people who are religious and who have faith in all of that. It's this extreme, this radical kind of vision of what religion is that scares me, and I put him in that way out fringe kind of thinking.
Yeah, it's this new. I guess it's a rise of a new Breitbart era of candidates. Now with Roy Moore, and we're now seeing that what happened in Tennessee with Coker, knowing that there are some other Republicans who might get challenged in the primary, and it might be this whole Breitbart or Steve Bannon push to get the Trumpism-like candidates on the ticket and in the Senate to go against Mitch McConnell. And right now, this divisiveness is now a part of both political parties, and it's shaking up this country. And right now, we want to focus on what really matters, and that is the quality of life for people. The quality of services that we're being provided. And this Royce platform is just total nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, let me ask you this now. I mean, you had Donald Trump last Friday out there stumping for Luther Strange. Put a little bit of political capital. I wouldn't say it was a full-throated endorsement. But as we found out, he's deleting some of the tweets of endorsement. What does this mean for Trump? What does this mean for the Republican establishment? Since the media structure kind of put Strange as, well, he was the establishment. He was the Republican candidate, and now you've got this Breitbart candidate. What do you think that means for us going forward?
Well, Trump kind of almost still winked at anybody in the audience that was a Roy Moore supporter. It's my understanding there were several Roy Moore fans in attendance at that Huntsville rally this past Friday. But I think it's going to be interesting for the party itself because you have someone who's openly going against, what they call the establishment and Mitch McConnell. How will other Republicans rally around Roy Moore and his rhetoric? What will that say about them? If they're supporting someone who is disincendiary, can we say the same thing about them? Do they believe the same thing that Roy Moore believes? I mean, he thinks homosexuality should be illegal. Let's think about that. He's really open and inflammatory when it comes to being a candidate. And so if the other Republicans and GOP people are going to support this person, then what does that say about the party and the position they're taking?
Yeah.
So this is actually a good time for anyone who considers themselves center-right to reevaluate, readjust, and support people who they think believe in some of the things that they support.
What do you say to the person who, like me, who said, this has been the path of the Republican Party for some time, to this extreme fringe? I mean, they've always tipped their hat to the extreme. They've always, paid, homage to the far out in the party. It's just now that the far out in the party they're taking over, and there isn't any room for center right or rational right, if you will.
Well, I mean, you just asked the question, like, are you going to sit back and be a part of the status quo, or are you going to push for change? What is it going to take for you to open your eyes and start supporting someone who believes in what you believe in, or at least doesn't believe in the things that you don't believe in as well? There has to be common ground. And I think, what we realize or what we fail to realize is we're living in this moment right now, but what about the future? Our children are watching this.
Yeah.
More than ever. I mean, at 32 years old, I didn't have access to the media that kids have right now. It's a touch of a screen. It's in your pocket, literally. You can get news instantly. It's not like before. And so, when parents are asleep or when they're just not around, our kids are watching this rhetoric. They're watching this hate. They're watching what's going on. And what does that mean for them 10, 15, 20 years down the line when they become voters or when they run for office? And so what we're doing now is actually setting the seeds for the future. And that's what I would talk to them about. Think about the future. Think about what's really at stake here.
Yeah, I say often, our children are watching, and in 20, 30 years, they're going to look back and either say we did the right thing, or they're going to really hate us for the choices we make today.
Right.
And I would argue Roy Moore being one of those choices, because I fear where this takes us down the road. So on the other side of this, I mean, the Democrats have got to be looking at this as an opportunity to point out that, look, a lot of the things that Democrats have been saying about Republicans for the last 20 years, quite accurate.
Oh, I mean, it's accurate. At the same time, we have to ensure that we are continuing to reach our voters and meet them where they are, and not expect them to do the right thing because it looks different. We still have to continue to have that conversation on the doors. One-on-one conversation is the most effective form of conversation. Grassroots organizing. If there's not a time for grassroots organizing, more than anything, now is that time. Specifically in the state of Alabama, which was the center of the civil rights movement, the Voting Rights Act, and to have this country and the state where it is right now. To think that Alabama can once again, change the tide and change history with getting Doug Jones in office. They haven't had a Democrat in the Senate since '92.
Wow. And again, you look at Alabama's history, and you're right. We had done a civil rights tour a couple of years back and went through Birmingham and spent some time there. And it's remarkable, the movement forward, and to see someone like Moore who could take us that far backwards, really, really very, very troubling.
Yeah.
So as a Southerner, and again, there's we still have this North-South divide, since we have to identify Alabama as the South. As a Southerner, what should the rest of the country know about where you're from, that region of the country, when looking at this race? Because a lot of us, and I had people, texting me and emailing me last night going, holy, what's wrong with these people? What is it that, where's that divide? What should we know?
We know that we are a passionate group of individuals. I was reluctant enough to grow up and live in Atlanta, which is different from a lot of other southern states, but it's also the same. Similarly, like Birmingham, Atlanta at its height was 65% African American. You have Birmingham right now is still sitting high at almost 70% African American. But it's that engagement and that other factor of getting people to the table, one, getting out and voting, and not just voting in a presidential election, voting on a consistent basis in midterms and in local elections. If the turnout was as high as it was for local elections, it would be a different story. And so you want to have them understand the purpose that you need to vote as much as you can when it's the opportunity to go, because that is the one thing, that is the one of the equalizing factors that we have in our hands to let your voice be heard. But also, who are we putting in office? Are they really looking out for the best interests of the community? Is it, and they're not, quote unquote, selling out to line the pockets of themselves or their friends. But again, like I said before, Alabama is football, faith, and family, and that's general consensus in Mississippi and in Georgia, and even some of the states like Arkansas and Tennessee. And so you just have that conversation with those folks. It's going to be a difficult conversation. Let's not say hate is strong in the South, but at the end of the day, we all agree. We all will come together. Look at the crisis that happen whenever a natural disaster happens. Is at that point we see no color. We just see people in need. And it hates to have it come to a Katrina or Maria or the hurricanes that just happen. But again, when things happen, we come together and just hope that right now we don't need any catastrophes for us to come together, that we understand that common sense is our future.
Yeah, I'm with you, Rich. I appreciate the time, man. Any predictions for December?
There will be a winner. That's all I can tell you.
There you go. Rich McDaniel.
I know that the Democrats on the ground will fight. And they will do all they can to ensure that Doug Jones is elected. But there will be a winner. There will be a loser.
There you go.
Stay tuned.
I appreciate it, Rich. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks.
Great talking with you, Rich McDaniel. Let's take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. This is the Rick Smith Show. For working people. Come to talk.
Sanity and rational thought back to America. Rick Smith.
Newsflash. Republican congressional leaders have come up with yet another grand scheme to fix America's healthcare system. So look out, because when they say fix, they mean it in the same sense your veterinarian uses the word. For the gazillionth time, GOP lawmakers have put a shiny new ribbon on their same old ugly package of health insurance deforms. As before, this latest plan would eliminate coverage for millions of Americans, raise the price of insurance for the middle class, and deliver much less care. But one guy says he loves it. A great bill, tweeted Donald Trump. I'm guessing that, once again, our Twitterer-in-chief hasn't actually read the bill he's praising or even scanned the factual summary of what it does. But he might want to hear the opinions of his fellow corporate chieftains who have read every word of it. For example, the CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield flatly rejects the rewrite because it, quote, would allow states to waive key consumer protections and undermine safeguards for those with pre-existing conditions. Also, he points out that the plan would increase uncertainty in the marketplace, making coverage more expensive and jeopardizing Americans' choice of health plans. Or Trump could ponder the conclusion of a health policy expert. The bill is, quote, just basically injecting chaos in 50 state capitals for the next 2 years. Or maybe he would value a state health executive's perspective. Quote, the bill's cuts would be devastating to Alaska's healthcare system, and patients will bear the consequences through reduced access to health care and lost insurance coverage. This is Jim Hightower saying Trump and the GOP are wasting Congress's time and what little public credibility they have left by continuing to play partisan politics with people's health. There's nothing great about that.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
These are words you should have told the truth. You're lying and trying to get the proof. Where you gonna run to? Where you gonna hide? You're running for the door now. No one's getting out alive.
That's the question. Where are you gonna run? Where do you hide from the torch-bearing zealots? Where are you gonna run and hide? Where are you gonna go? Now that there could be one of them sitting right front and center in the U.S. Senate. Wow. I mean, I know, and I've been to Alabama. I know that there are folks there who take great pride in ignorance. And I know there are people there who take great pride in intelligence. And there are great people who take, great pride in sanity and taking care of your neighbors and all of that. And then there are those who, well, they just want to trash the system. And what we saw last night, honestly, the people who came out, those are the trash the system people. Those are we're going to impose our narrow-minded views upon everyone. That's the scary thing in all of this conversation, is that, Moore is not somebody who can be. I know in this day's politics, the idea of compromise is a horrible idea, and it's almost like a four-letter word. But in order to get things done, and we're seeing this with healthcare, the fact that the Republicans who have a majority should be able to steamroll whatever bad policy they put up, whatever bad idea they can come up with, they should be able to just walk it right through. They've got that kind of power, especially on the healthcare when you were using budget reconciliation. As you were using that, I mean, it's 50 votes. That's it. You got a 52-vote majority. And yet still you can't seem to be sane in your own thoughts. You've still got people, and Moore is going to be an outlier. If he wins in December, I hope he will be the one that all of the other kids in the class look at as the oddball. And they ostracize him and push him off to the side because really, honestly, and truthfully, he's that far off to the fringe. But in the meantime, we're electing people who don't believe in government. And one of the things I point to is, you look at our infrastructure, something that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, was not a divisive issue, was not partisan. In fact, everyone wanted to feed at the trough of infrastructure. It brought jobs, it brought investment, it brought new things, shiny stuff, ribbon cuttings, great for campaigns, lots of photo ops. And yet now we can't seem to get an infrastructure bill pushed through anywhere for love or money. And now we find out that the grand Trump plan, because if you remember, Trump ran on the idea that what we're going to do is the private sector is going to take care of it. Private sector is going to come in and they're going to fund it. Well, they're kind of now finding out what what I've been saying all along is, well, it's not going to work because the private sector isn't going to invest in anything that isn't profitable. That's why they're the private sector. It's about money. It's not about providing a good. It's not providing a service. It's none of that. It's about profit. Simple. And now you've got the Trump folks going, well, maybe infrastructure isn't going to happen this year. And you go, well, what? If I were advising Trump, if I were his chief of staff on January 20th of this year, I would have said first thing, infrastructure. Huge, massive, tremendous. Whatever words you want to, whatever Trumpian word you want to throw in there. Huge. It would have been a massive investment in infrastructure. And yes, I would have taken on the mantra of stimulus because that's what it is. It's a massive stimulus to the economy. It would have created millions of jobs. And guess what? It would have taken us out of the Stone Age. But yet we didn't do that. No. We went a whole other way. And you go, explain to me the sense in this. And now they're finding out, look, there aren't any silver bullets in infrastructure. You actually have to invest in it. We're actually going to have to figure out how to raise funding to do this. And you look at the tax scheme that they're coming out with is more Republican tax schemes of the past. I mean, it's really quite remarkable at how short-sighted and short-memoried these people are. It is the Republican tax ideal. It's the fetish of tax cuts that have created a $20 trillion debt. It is the Reagan-esque supply-side voodoo Reaganomic fetish that put us in this situation to where we now have a crumbling infrastructure. It is this. We have to pay homage to the wealth class with more and more and more. We have to sacrifice our children's future at the altar of, well, more for the handful. And yet we still keep doing this stupid, nonsensical, ridiculous. And yet here we are, trillions of dollars in the hole when it comes to infrastructure. And still nothing is going to get done. And the thing is you've got someone like Mike Pence on the ticket who should be against these ideas based on how bad he screwed the people of Indiana when they privatized the Indiana Turnpike. And if you've ever driven it, it's trash. Because they sucked all the profit out of it. They sucked the investment out of it and said, well, can't make it work. Back to you. That's what privatization gets us. And yet still no sane, rational voices on the right to say, look, we need to be investing in infrastructure. This is good for business. When the AFL-CIO and the Chamber of Commerce can come together and sit at the same table and say, we agree on something, it's probably a high priority for the American people. Seriously. I mean, when they've come together and say, look, for business, it's good because we get things to market. For work, for labor, we get workers. It's good for all of us. It helps not just the economy, but it helps move the country forward. And I don't know if we need to start talking about our infrastructure in a national security frame. Say, the military needs it, so because we do everything we can possibly spend without thoughts like drunken sailors on leave. Yes, it's for the military. What's it going to take? I'm curious. And this new tax scheme, again, another handout to the well-to-do. And, some crumbs for some other folks. Crumbs. Yet, no real investment, no moving the ball forward, no helping the country, no sanity. Just more of the same. More of what you expect from our Republican friends. Quick break, right back with Talk Media News. Stick around.
Be a lousy scab, or will you be a man? Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1909. That was the day the International Lady Garment Workers Union began a strike against the Triangle Shirtwaist Company. Eventually, female workers struck at 339 of the 352 shirtwaist manufacturing firms in New York City. The strike was referred to as the Uprising of 20,000. Women comprised 70% of all garment workers. Men performed the higher paid work of cutting and pressing, while women earned less for assembling and finishing garments. Women often had to furnish their own supplies, including needles, thread, and even sewing machines. Some firms locked the doors to each floor. The workers, mostly young girls and women, had to ask permission to go to the bathroom. While the strike initially started at the Triangle Shirtwaist Company, it soon spread to other factories. At a meeting of garment workers in November, a young girl, Clara Lemlich, called for a general strike. One day later, 15,000 shirtwaist workers walked out of the factories, with more joining the strike the following day. The strike continued until February 1910 and ended with factory owners agreeing to meet the demands of the workers, which included better pay and shorter hours. This strike was a notable achievement for these mostly immigrant working women. Nevertheless, garment workers after the 1909 strike continued to suffer harsh working conditions. A year later, many workers died in the tragic Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire. The fact that the company locked the doors on each floor meant that the workers had no means of escaping the blaze. Today, it's very difficult to find clothing that is union made. We must work together to restore labor unions to protect the safety of those who make our clothing, both in the United States and throughout the world. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
The most important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So, evidently the Donald rolling out the big tax cuts, the tax scheme. Interestingly enough, going to be standing there with a farmer from Indiana who is the largest, the ninth largest recipient of tax-funded money, subsidies, in the tune of about $3.3 billion over the last several years, calling for, the end of their estate tax because the government's killing us. All that welfare. Why can't we call them welfare queens? Why can't we do that? Just a thought. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world and in Washington, D.C. Victoria Jones, Talk Media News. Victoria, how are we today?
I'm great, thank you.
So the big tax scheme's coming.
Big tax scheme is coming, and it's going to be rolled out today. And the Washington Post has obtained a 9-page document.
Wow,
titled,
that's long.
It is so. Unified Framework for Fixing Our Broken Tax Code. It is a Republican document, and it leaves many key questions unanswered. It's a White House and GOP congressional plan. It preserves popular tax deductions, proposes slashing tax rates for the wealthy, middle class, and businesses, but it doesn't identify the numerous tax breaks that they say will be removed in order to offset some of the trillions of dollars in revenue lost by cutting tax rates.
You know how we do that? We just have larger debt. Kind of like Reagan did. Kind of like we've been doing it for the last 40 years under Republican rule.
Oh.
Yeah, we've got this tax cut fetish. We just haven't figured out how to pay our bills. And then we say, oh, well, you poor people. And again, this is more that, in my opinion, you don't have to agree, more of that creating the crisis so that they can go back, a couple of years and go, gee, debt's too big. Sorry, Granny, to the curb with you. Sorry, people in the wheelchairs. Out with you. Sorry, kids don't need an education. Sorry, infrastructure. It's going to be great. It's going to be fabulous. The new world order.
Harsh.
Yeah, it's gonna be
Or
great.
maybe the plan's a bit harsh. I don't know.
There you go. Look, I guess if we're not the wealthy, nothing in this good. And so, in this 9-page plan, will we get another Bush prize like we did during the Bush years, where we got the check in the mail and the letter to remind us that the check was coming?
I doubt that.
No? Okay.
I think that was like a one-off treat, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, they tried it during the Ford years, and they realized that it was a failed idea back during the Ford years. Because there was actually no new consumption, and we relearned it again during the W years. Anyway, let's move on. Evidently, Puerto Rico is an island in the middle of a big ocean. Did you know that?
I didn't know. I thought it was a massive landmass myself.
But it's in the middle of a big ocean.
Big ocean. Big ocean. Big ocean. Yes. Big ocean. Now, there was a very interesting story in the Washington Post yesterday written by Philip Bump, who's a very good reporter. And he obviously took this sentence and thought about it and thought, I'll do a bit of research on this. And he's just a really good reporter. And basically what he turned up was, yeah, it's a big ocean. But guess what? Private shipping companies have been steaming out into the big ocean, and ships park outside the hurricane zone, which apparently you can do. Sounds scary to me, but they do it, and they wait for it to pass, and then they steam full force to Puerto Rico or wherever to deliver the goods.
Right.
That's what they do. Now, I'm going to say something really radical here, Rick.
Uh-oh.
Government could do it too.
No.
Yep. Could be done. But in this case, government didn't.
Of course it didn't. Because I got to question whether Trump knows that Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory.
Well, now you're copying Hillary Clinton.
Oh, did she actually say that?
She actually said that, yes.
Good on her. Yeah, maybe where was that Hillary Clinton during the campaign?
I know. She's getting bold.
Yeah, where was that person during the campaign? Somebody would have actually wanted to vote for her then, instead of had to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
she said that. But that's correct. So, they could do it. Now, they are sending what I heard described on AP radio this morning as a flotilla of ships, which takes me back to my English history classes and the Spanish Armada. So they're sending an American armada of ships.
All right.
King Philip of Spain, presumably, is off there. I'm waiting for Queen Elizabeth I to show up now, so it's all going to get very confusing. Anyway, they're sending a flotilla of ships to Puerto Rico, but it is a very big ocean, so it'll take a bit of time.
It is a very big ocean.
Very big ocean. Not actually as big as the Indian Ocean or the Pacific Ocean, but it is a big ocean.
Oh, now you're showing off.
I'm showing off.
You and your learning.
Learning. It's that boarding school.
I'm sorry. That's we also found yesterday that the Donald, all he does is work. He says, all I do, I work all day long.
But it was a contradictory statement. He said, I wasn't preoccupied with the NFL. To me, the NFL situation is a very important situation. I've heard that before about was I preoccupied. Not at all, not at all. I have plenty of time on my hands. All I do is work.
I know, that was brilliant.
I
love it. I love the I love the fact that he just Friday nights in Alabama. I wish there were more impromptu kind of responses. Look, if we're going to hell, if the end times are truly here, now with Roy Moore going to possibly be sitting in the Senate and Christian Sharia
I think the end times are here, don't you? With Roy Moore possibly sitting in the U.S. Senate.
Yeah, and look, I mean, the possibility of Christian Sharia law is that much closer every day. And as I said, he doesn't want to take us just back to the 1950s. He wants us to go back to the 1650s.
Yeah, well, there you go. Now, don't forget, Roy Moore said this week, I believe it was, that Indiana and Illinois have got Sharia law.
Yeah.
But he wasn't sure, but he said, I'm saying it anyway. He said, I don't know that, but I'm going to say it.
Yeah, well, you gotta love people who are very happy with their ignorance.
Apparently he is.
No, he is. Look, he's
comfortable.
He's very comfortable being a true believer in whatever nonsense he makes up.
Birtherism.
There you go. And as I said earlier, he would be somebody who we'd have stonings in the public square if you were gay, or maybe even Monday night executions.
I don't know. I don't know. He may be full of the milk of human kindness. I don't know the man.
Yeah, the milk of human kindness. That's another good one. Good for you. You're on fire today.
I am.
Good. Now let's move on to the Affordable Care Act repeal and replace. Evidently, that's not going to happen.
Not now. At least not before September the 30th.
Right.
Because, reconciliation, blah, blah, 51 votes, not going to happen. But it doesn't mean that it's done. In other words, it's dead, but Frankenstein, monsters, Mary Shelley, showing off that learning again. So it's possible it could be revived. In fact, President Trump spoke at a fundraiser last night for himself and said that he is going to do repeal and replace. Now, they can revive reconciliation potentially next year. And they could bring some kind of bill forward again.
Okay. I would argue what they're just going to do is they're going to use the ability to starve the ACA, wait for it to implode, say, see, we told you it was going to implode.
They can do that too.
Either
they are
way,
not going to be doing anything to encourage sign-ups at all.
No, that's someone even sent me an email saying that the website was down for a bit. Now, I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that they had actually taken it down for a bit of time. And like I said, I don't know if that's accurate, but someone said, hey, this happened. And I went and I looked, it was there. But, I would not put it past them.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't speak to that. So yeah. I don't know.
So there you go.
But I just don't know about that. So, but it's so it's not doing so great. Now, we do have Senator Lamar Alexander and Patty Murray are looking to, shore up the Affordable Care Act and to shore up markets, but you don't have all the members of the Senate on board with doing something bipartisan either.
No, I mean it's crazy. I mean, for all of the finger pointing and all, you would think policy would matter. It doesn't. And finally, I want to get to the most important story of the day. Lots of news about Russians. Lots of news about hacking and elections. Evidently, there's a cannibal couple, Russian.
There is a cannibal couple, the Russian cannibal couple. This is a huge story. The investigators believe that this couple knocked their victims out with sedatives, then skinned them alive. Then they ate parts of their victims, froze the remains, or packed them in jars. And at times, they tried to turn soldiers at the military academy where they worked into unwitting cannibals, slipping canned human meat into their food. Now, they could have continued to get away with it, and they've killed rather a lot of people if they hadn't left their cell phone on the street. And somebody found the cell phone, picked it up, some road crews started swiping through the photos. And on the phone were photos of a man with different parts of a dismembered human body in his mouth. So they rushed to the cops.
Wow.
As you do.
No kidding, as you do.
As you do. And they arrested this guy, and in police custody, he said, yeah, he and his wife have practiced cannibalism at least 30 times in the last 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
I guess the other question is, did they cook them well? Because there's just no way I could eat bloody meat.
Well, there is one picture of a head on a serving plate with fruit.
All right. Well, at least they were trying to eat healthy. Good for them.
Yeah.
Good for them. Wow, crazy. Oh, look. We had Jeffrey Dahmer. They've got the cannibal couple. There you go. Victoria,
At least
appreciate
they were loving.
Yep. At least appreciate the time, man.
Thank
Thanks so much. Victoria Jones, Talk Media News. Quick break. Right back after this. Wow. Yummy.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. I heard Galia Vauthier's voice for the first time emanating from the Bluesberry Cafe in Clarksdale, Mississippi, birthplace of the Delta Blues. I had come to Clarksdale after the Nissan workers had lost their union election in Canton, Mississippi. The music that drew her from busking in the streets of Brussels, Belgium to singing in Clarksdale is a working-class beat. Cotton-picking sharecroppers in the Delta channeled hundreds of years of slavery, oppression, and transcendent spirit to create it. Like jazz and rock, it's created by the working class. This music, this beat, is a powerful, liberating energy and a hell of a lot of fun, letting us forget our troubles and dance. Galia's life as a traveling rhythm and blues singer pulsates to that beat.
Kiss me, baby. Ooh, I feel good. Hold me, baby. Yeah, I want you loving like a lover should. You're fine, it's okay. I want to tell it till that you mine. I trim my nails and I trouble my tongue. I'm little mess, my shoe is fun. Come on, baby, drive me crazy. Goodness gracious, great balls of fire.
From rockabilly, I discovered rock and roll, a little richer than rhythm and blues, and then I discovered artists a little bit less famous, right, than just Elvis Presley. From Little Richard to Ruth Brown, Laverne Baker, Winona Carr.
I asked Galia about her impressions of America, not just the music, but the socio-political struggle for justice and worker rights.
I hate you guys for having voted Trump, so next time do better. If I live here, the mentality has to evolve. I think people think things can't change. Of course it's not going to change if everybody say that.
Galia says Hillary Clinton was much better than Trump, but she was like an iceberg. Much remained hidden.
Trump, it's not an iceberg, it's like a mountain of bull. You see everything and it's really in front of you and it's big. And I think that's a good last note.
Galia's first album, CD, is Galia and Voodoo Casino. She's teaming up now with Mama's Boys for a new recording out soon on a New Orleans label.
Come on, babe, give that sugar. Come on, babe, where's the sugar?
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit workersindependentnews.com.
Exposing GOP hypocrisy. The Rick Smith Show.
Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So yesterday, Politico reported that Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal said he's about 99% sure that there will be some criminal charges from the Mueller investigation and all of this Russian stuff. He said that, Flynn and Manafort almost surely will be indicted as the special counsel probes into the Russian interference. He also said he wasn't sure that this would reach to Trump, but he did believe that several associates were certainly possible to see indictments. And you remember back at the beginning of this this debacle where the Republicans wanted to gut the ethics office? Remember that? Kind of makes you wonder. Now we find out that, there's that little loosening of, private donations kind of under the radar to go to set up defense funds for all of those who suspect that they're going to be indicted. Yeah, just kind of want to throw that out there as a reminder. Anyway, here to talk about this. And look, are we going to see indictments? Will it be Manafort, Flynn, Stone, down the list? Well, I've got Sarah Kendzior to come talk with us. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So you agreeing with Blumenthal? 99% sure? Are we that high?
I mean, I think it's quite likely we'll see indictments for Manafort and Flynn. I mean, Mueller himself has said that it's not just Blumenthal. He said that he's, told Manafort directly that he's going to be indicted, and Flynn is the only person to have actually faced consequences in this administration, so I think that, there's a high likelihood he will as well. And the other thing to share in common, of course, is that they've, both had to declare themselves foreign agents. So none of this is really, spurious information. But what I wonder about is, they may be indicted, but will they actually face repercussions or punishment for their crimes? That's the thing I think is more up in the air.
Right, and you think what, the president would pardon them?
I think they could possibly be pardoned. I think there might be some kind of, deal cut to be a more situation.
So some type of deal with the administration is what you're saying.
Sessions in the DOJ. We still have a number of people, involved in ostensibly investigating Russian interference who are implicated in Russian interference. And, the process here of how exactly, we're going to go about prosecuting is a little ambivalent, especially when it comes to Trump. There's been a lot of debate about that. Can the sitting president be indicted? Can he be imprisoned? All these sorts of questions, new legal issues to discuss. So I'm not quite sure how that will play out.
Yeah, I'm not either. But we saw yesterday Roger Stone testified behind closed doors, and my favorite Roger Stone quote is, "There's one trick that's not in my bag, and that's treason." And I'm like, everything else outside of treason, that the bar is that low.
Yeah, I mean that's really typical of him. He's never been shy about declaring his tactics. He let a documentary filmmaker make a movie about them. He brags about them. He brags about what he gets away with, which is both informative and alarming because he's just completely confident that he's not going to face any consequences for his actions because he's been pulling this kind of shit for about 40 years, since he worked with the Nixon administration and with Roy Cohn and with Manafort, and nothing has happened to him. Just out of money, people. So, I think there's possibility he may also be indicted. I thought his deposition was rather creative, but there's, hard evidence linking him to the WikiLeaks aspect of the case in particular. But I don't know whether we'll really see, the kind of consequences a figure like Stone merits play out.
What would the consequences that would merit? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I feel like, if you've committed treason, if you've, been implicated in a conspiracy with a hostile foreign power to subvert the electoral process, if you've been involved in bringing, dark money from foreign powers into campaigns, et cetera, et cetera. I could go on and on. I think that, prison is a reasonable, consequence to that sort of action. I think that there may be a lot of maneuvering because there's federal crimes and there's state crimes in the state of New York. And for somebody like Manafort, who is implicated in money laundering, that's particularly significant. So I think there may be a lot of, deal-making kind of, getting information out of people by offering them various things or threatening various things. But I'm just hoping that we at least see something happen, that they don't just walk away doing this to our country. And because so many people in the Trump administration have gotten away with things that in a regular administration, they certainly would have been removed from position or prosecuted. I don't have faith in the judicial process at this point.
Yeah, especially with Jeffy at the head of the Department of Justice.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's scary stuff. And, but here's the thing, over the weekend, we spent a lot of time talking about kneeling in the NFL and all of that. Yet on Friday, We saw the Department of Homeland Security saying that 21 states were targeted by hackers, and I don't think there was enough paid to that. I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, it's an interesting thing because that's something that me and a lot of other people wondered about from the day the election was held, not just because Trump won, but because of where he won, where other people won, the margins in different states, and a lot of issues we'd heard about complications that had ensued in voting booths and so forth on that day. And so, there's been this question of were the votes tampered with? Harry Reid, way back in August, warned that Russia was trying to falsify the actual votes of the election, and he was very clear in this. He wrote that in a letter to Comey. This is all sort of out there for a very long time, and it's only recently that these stories have been coming out. And 21 states came out first, and then was followed up by a story that 39 states were affected. That was from Bloomberg News. Now we're back to 21. The 21 states basically had to declare themselves that they were targets of Russian interference. DHS didn't want to, be forthright with that information. And I think that's a huge concern. I mean, I wonder why the secrecy? Isn't election integrity important? Isn't that a nonpartisan issue, that everybody should be interested in? We should know every detail of how this played out. And, what I wonder about is that if this is so widespread, it implicates, not just the legitimacy of Trump's win, but of the entire election, of, local and state, winners of this election. And so that pulls the whole thing into question, and I wonder if that's the reason for the hesitancy in reporting on it.
No, that's a good point because, look, at the end of this, you look at all of the silence that from the beginning. I said, look, if there is Russian interference, we should want to get to the bottom of that, not just for right now, but for the future. And now we find out, and I don't know if you've seen this, but now they're claiming that there's been tons of Russian money that went into these Facebook ads, not just backing Trump, but also backing Sanders and Jill Stein.
Yeah, I saw that last night, and none of that is surprising. I mean, this was kind of reported on during the election, and if you brought it out, you tended to be shouted down. And of course, all of these candidates had actual human beings who did support them, but that doesn't change the fact that foreign money is illegal as a campaign contribution, and so that's the issue at hand. Is not exactly whether it worked, and certainly not is this the sole factor, because obviously, it is not the sole factor in the wins of all these people, but what's the intent? And, was it illegal, in what they did? And, the answer obviously seems to be yes.
No, I mean, it's one of these things where you just, it seems so overwhelming to the average person that it's almost unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we have technology. We have platforms that are so new that I think our political system just hasn't caught up to them yet. Something like smartphones or Facebook or Twitter, really changed the way people interact. It changed the way people perceive information, the way they think about what's true and what's false. And, I think that people were kind of understandably, to some degree, caught off guard about, the impact that a foreign country could have in an election when we're able to cross these borders through technology. But, I find Facebook, really pitiful. Scientists who have been studying, the impact of social media and the ability of authoritarian states to make these maneuvers for years, and who have been warning about Facebook and about Twitter for years and meeting with representatives from those companies directly. So for them to claim that they're naive it's simply false. They knew that governments and political parties and all these bad actors had the capacity to manipulate their platforms. They were accepting payments in rubles in Facebook's case. So I really don't understand how they can feign innocence on this one.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. But here's the thing. I mean, these social media platforms have grown so big and international. How would you go about stopping this kind of abuse?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question. And, one thing I think is frustrating is that the staffs of these platforms tend to be very small. and tend to be, overwhelmingly, white male, like tech guys, computer guys. And I think it would be good if they would employ social scientists, people who understand, the political and the social ramifications of digital media, to analyze this, and also to employ more people who are looking at things that I think could be easily cleaned up, like bots. There are many cases on Twitter where you can tell something is automated, and you can tell that it's being automated for a political purpose. And I think that if Twitter, for example, that would go a long way to prevent, political propaganda from being amplified. On the other hand, I do think there is a genuine free speech issue, and I do think that, all this propaganda taps into and exploits things that are already there. And so, of course, just getting rid of bad actors on social media is, a small part of the problem. We have to confront the issues that they've been exploiting and, the corruption that we really do have in our own political process. But I think that there are clear, legal regulations about, for example, accepting foreign money for a campaign. And that's the kind of thing I think people can look into right away.
No, absolutely. And I think somebody should be going to jail over it. But, you look at the Facebook, this Facebook people came out and said, they got like $100,000. And I go, that seems awful. And I know you extrapolate that out into the number of views and all of that stuff, and it's a huge number. But $100,000 seems like, one of those admissions. It's a big enough number for people to go, wow, that's a lot. But it seems kind of small to me.
It is. It's very small. I'm surprised that, Facebook didn't demand more, but I guess for Facebook, this is nothing. And it kind of makes you wonder, like, why would they bother? Why would they take a legal risk of accepting this money when they would know, I assume, that, the government might look into it and they could face legal consequences? I really have no idea. And, I'm also skeptical about the effectiveness of, some of these campaigns. There's ones that are really ridiculous. There have been Russian, secession movements for Texas written in broken English, called things like, I love Texas shape. And, they weren't really resonating with the citizens of Texas because they were so poorly constructed. But I think, again, what you need to look at is the intent of the people behind it, of, generally Russian actors who are trying to subvert American democracy, and why American companies are not just allowing it, but are, taking financial compensation for it. That's really bad, because if they're doing that on a small scale, this is what we know about. It just makes me wonder, like, well, what don't we know? What else were they doing? What is Facebook doing with all the data that they've collected on American citizens for the last decade? I mean, that's very alarming.
No, and that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But back to your point about, like the Texas secession movement and, the broken message and just the kind of amateurish way of going about it. The question that brings me to is, if they were doing this, who were they dealing with here, possibly in the Trump campaign, to hone those messages and to get them on point, as we saw. Look, I live, not too far from Melvin Reddick, evidently. Melvin lives, I guess, just in Harrisburg, a couple miles from here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question I think people are asking. And, I wonder about that question, because they're like, who are they working for, that has the knowledge of particular locations, or, who to influence and so forth. And I think in some cases they lack that knowledge. A lot of their trolling and their fake groups are very poor, and they really don't resonate. And this just seems like a day job for some, Russians, off. That's just like what they do for a living, and they're not good at it. I think that the most effective, the most effective media has been like, the alt-right media, basically, like people who we know have been directly connected to Trump and appear to be connected to Russia, like Breitbart or, the various sort of prominent Twitter personalities from that field. And what I would like to see is, who is funding that? Who is funding, those people? Who are, who, and honestly, some of this goes into the left as well. Like, I just makes me wonder where, because the way that the Russian government works in terms of this, I'm kind of skeptical that, it's not like some guy shows up and it's like, hi, I'm in the FSB. Do you want to start a media outlet for us? I'm guessing that there are intermediaries and that, there are financial transactions that possibly people that are putting out this propaganda aren't even aware of. So I'm hoping that Mueller is digging deep on that and just basically following.
Yeah. Do you have much faith in Mueller's investigation?
What?
Do you have faith in Mueller's investigation? Because I've had some people who say, he'll go so far and maybe not really go all the. I'm curious your thoughts of where he may go.
I'm mixed. I mean, I think he's assembled a really good team, and I think that it's good that the team covers so many different aspects, like political stuff, money laundering, propaganda, technology, because this is a really huge investigation. Yeah. And so he's got a team of pros. I don't know exactly how far he'll go, because, one thing that's bothered me is from the beginning, there's been insistence from political leaders of, do not question the integrity of the electoral process. That's what Russia wants you to do. And that's, of course, true. That is what Russia wants you to do. But it's very clear to me that the electoral, the integrity of the electoral process is being questioned for a very good reason, because we've seen how it's been abused and we've seen how voters have been manipulated. And I think the best way to restore trust in that process is to be as transparent as possible and to hold people accountable for what was done. And that's going to be a very painful process, because that's going to open up all the vulnerabilities of American democracy. It's probably going to show that a lot of maybe were trusted, especially within the GOP, acted in bad faith. We're not honoring the Constitution. It's going to be a mess. And so I don't know how open Mueller is going to be with what he's found, because if you look at what we know publicly, it's already so damaging, it's so incriminating, and it's so horrifying that whatever they know privately on top of that, I mean, it's probably going to be very upsetting to hear. But I do think he is trying to conduct an investigation of integrity. I just don't know what the outcome is going to be.
It'll be interesting to see. Last question, what are you anticipating over the next week or so as this continues? You got Blumenthal saying, look, 99% sure that they're going to be indictments. What are you expecting over in the near future? I'm
wondering exactly where Manafort is, because the New York Times announced that he was headed to Kurdistan. He's headed to Iraq to participate in the Kurdish referendum. And God knows why those guys hired Manafort to be involved in that process. But that would mean that he's out of the country. That would mean that no one is thinking about things like whether he's a flight risk or confiscating his passport. So I'd really like to know where he is right now, because I think that factors into, whether he's going to be indicted. We've also heard, rumors and proclamations that indictments are imminent for a very long time. And we've heard them from some people who I think are working on behalf of the Trump administration, or, basically for, the alt-right, to mislead people and to kind of, make people passive, make people think, oh, it's all being handled, everything's cool. And so I don't really trust a lot of information that I see, but I think we need to keep pushing for an indictment. We need to support a transparent and accountable judicial process. And that's really all we can do.
Yeah. Sarah, I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you. Always great getting your insight. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you.
Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around and listen to The Rick Smith Show.
For jobs in Steel Town, for the working and poor. From Wall Street to Main Street, to the yet to be named street, child connect the dots and see we all live on the same street.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1903. That was the day that is remembered in Virginia as the wreck of Old 97. Old 97, also known as the Fast Mail, was a Southern Railway freight train. It carried the U.S. mail from Washington, D.C. to Atlanta, Georgia. The train wreck happened on the leg of the trip from Monroe, Virginia to Spencer, North Carolina. The train had come in late to Monroe. It was reported that the railway company ordered the engineer to increase the speed of the train to make up time. The company had to pay a penalty if they delivered the mail late. But when the train neared Danville, Virginia, the tracks curved at the Stillhouse Trestle Bridge. The speed was simply too much. Despite the engineer's efforts to slow the train, it careened off the tracks and plummeted to the rocky ravine 45 feet below. 11 of the 16 people on board the train died. including the conductor, the engineer, and the flagmen and both firemen. The railway company blamed the wreck on the deceased engineer. Newspapers across the country carried photos of the wreck. The disaster became the subject of multiple ballads. One version, by Vernon Dalhart in 1924, is thought to be the first million-selling country record in U.S. history. Johnny Cash recorded another well-known version of the song. In 1993, an alternative country band took the name the Old 97s, hearkening back to the disaster and the songs that inspired.
They gave him his orders at Monroe, Virginia. Said, Steve, you're way behind time. This is not 38, this is old 97. You must put her into Spencer on time.
For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
So it turns out Spice Boy, he's also lawyered up as the Russian probe continues to close in. And look, you had Roger Stone testify yesterday, and the more this gets on the record, the more that it's going to tighten. The more that they have to actually be sworn to statements and that they're tied to statements, the more this starts to close in. And the other part of this, the tax returns, Trump's tax returns keep coming up in my mind. Again, the statements of never had any dealings in Russia. Well, I think those tax returns might show something. And you look at, and as I've been saying from the very beginning, the relationships between the oligarch in Russia and the wealth class here in the U.S., our equal ruling class, they're tight. There are tight bonds there between these groups. And, some of them may go, well, you know what, we're just, it's not treasonous to take money from friends. Granted, they have a whole different agenda, but it's a whole nother thing. Again, I look at this and there's so many questions to be had. And look, I'm hoping this Mueller investigation does answer some of them. But, wow. Anyway, also the Daily Beast is reporting that a guy named Paul Horner, he's credited with being one of the most famous fake news hoax kind of guys behind Trump's 2016 victory. Evidently, he's been found dead near his home in Phoenix, according to the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. He was found dead in his bed on September 18th. They say that there are no signs of foul play. Evidently, he was a heavy prescription drug user, and there was, quote, evidence at the scene that suggested it could have been an accidental overdose. Yeah, I would argue some of, just hey, like in Russia, people fall out of windows all the time. It just happened to be walking by. There was an open window. Oops, tripped, fell out the window, 20 stories, splat. I got to wonder how many accidental overdoses. Because, hey, look, we got an opioid addiction problem in this country. Could have been just an accident. Now, I'm not saying that, the Donald killed him, but if I were a right winger, and this is where I love the Clinton years, all of the right wing fantasy of, Bill Clinton sneaking out in the middle of the night to shoot George Foster in the head. All of those fantasies, had all these people killed. He had illegitimate children. All of this stuff. Just kind of, I can't go there. But I look at this and I go, accidental, I don't know. Maybe, who knows? But there you go. One of the top fake news guys gone. Again, back to this idea of the tax returns. I've been calling for this for quite some time. Will Mueller delve into this? And it keeps coming back to the question of, Blumenthal saying there's going to be indictments, 99% certain. Can Trump derail this whole thing? And I believe it has to come back to us to make sure that the Republicans know there will be a political price to pay for not allowing an investigation to go forward. Because this is about, in my view, more than just Donald Trump. This is about our entire democracy. Were we hacked by a foreign power? Did the Kremlin choose our elected officials? You know, look at what we saw over this weekend, the divisions that we saw over this weekend, how easily we're ripped apart. What's 2018 going to bring us? If we do nothing now, what does 2018 bring? What does 2020 bring? I mean, the fact that a religious zealot, I mean, someone who I view as just crazy out on the fringe, won last night in Alabama. Are we looking at Roy Moore 2020? Is this how far we go as a crazy country over jingoism and nationalism? I got to wonder. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back and talk a little bit more about the weekend's events, evidently the president had a conversation with Jerry Jones. We'll get to some of that and what the Kneel movement, what that's going to bring us. Quick break. Back with Joshua Holland. Stick around.
10% of the people own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
Newsflash. Republican congressional leaders have come up with yet another grand scheme to fix America's healthcare system. So look out, because when they say fix, they mean it in the same sense your veterinarian uses the word. For the gazillionth time, GOP lawmakers have put a shiny new ribbon on their same old ugly package of health insurance deforms. As before, this latest plan would eliminate coverage for millions of Americans, raise the price of insurance for the middle class, and deliver much less care. But one guy says he loves it. A great bill, tweeted Donald Trump. I'm guessing that, once again, our Twitterer-in-chief hasn't actually read the bill he's praising, or even scanned the factual summary of what it does. But he might want to hear the opinions of his fellow corporate chieftains who have read every word of it. For example, the CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield flatly rejects the rewrite because it, quote, would allow states to waive key consumer protections and undermine safeguards for those with pre-existing conditions. Also, he points out that the plan would increase uncertainty in the marketplace, making coverage more expensive and jeopardizing Americans' choice of health plans. Or Trump could ponder the conclusion of a health policy expert. The bill is, quote, just basically injecting chaos in 50 state capitals for the next 2 years. Or maybe he would value a state health executive's perspective. Quote, the bill's cuts would be devastating to Alaska's healthcare system, and patients will bear the consequences through reduced access to health care and lost insurance coverage. This is Jim Hightower saying Trump and the GOP are wasting Congress's time and what little public credibility they have left by continuing to play partisan politics with people's health. There's nothing great about that.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So it appears the fire chief from Western Pennsylvania, evidently he resigned as chief last night after comments of his, calling Mike Tomlin a no good name, and got tons of attention for it. Evidently, he's blaming the media. And they go, really? You said it. You're the one who used the N-word. You're the one who put that out there. You posted it. Yet it's the media's fault for reporting your words accurately. How Trumpian. How Trumpian. And it's all over the fact that Mike Tomlin decided that didn't want his team to be in the middle of all of the nonsense with Trump, held the team in the locker room, which you can say it made a statement. It didn't. I don't know. But is that right? I don't know. And here to talk about the weekend's event, I've asked our good friend Joshua Holland to come talk with us. He is a contributor over at The Nation magazine, also does some stuff with Rolling Stone. Joshua, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So, what do you think of the fire chief's comments?
It's so typical of this kind of victimhood mentality, right? They've turned reality on its ear, where you are you're persecuted if you, for example, you kind of beat around the bush. He used the N-word, and now he's blaming the media for the response. And he says, they're portraying me as racist. Now, honestly, with people, if somebody goes on Facebook and says, that guy's a no good N-word, and then punctuates it, as he did, by saying, there, I said it, right? He was,
Where do you go from there?
The obvious conclusion is that he's comfortable with that language, and he has some issues with race.
There's nothing vague about that statement, is
there?
there?
There's nothing vague, yeah. It's not ambiguous.
That was right there with your comments, but again, there's this, especially on the right, this portrayal that it's all the media's fault. It's your fault, Joshua, for reporting my words.
Remember when they were the party of personal responsibility?
Yeah,
now
that's a long time ago.
There is no personal responsibility. If you are egregiously offensive and the people in your town call you out for it, it can't be your fault. It's not your responsibility. You didn't, and this goes with a larger narrative that's popular on the right, that white Christian conservatives are a persecuted minority in our society. And this has been stoked by Donald Trump with his war on so-called political correctness. We see conservative political correctness every single day. It's outrageous to kneel to protest racially discriminatory policing during the national anthem. How is that not political correctness? But it's a right-wing political correctness.
No, I'm with you. But you look at this, and the fact that Trump threw into the middle of this, just in my view, one, divided us. Along now in sports. Thanks for ruining my Sunday, you nitwit. And on the other side of this, really highlighted what was going on and had more people engaged in it. And I don't know that that's actually a bad thing.
There is this other Trump effect. We talk about the Trump effect with the rise of hate crimes, et cetera, but there's another Trump effect, which is that when he comes out against something, his popularity is such that a lot of people say, oh, well, maybe I'm going to be for that thing. And we've seen this with immigration. Americans' views, according to polls, of immigrants has improved, has warmed since Trump came into office, because he rails against them. And this was something that we saw, I think, pretty clearly over the weekend. There was pretty limited protest. I'm not somebody who's followed every single player who's taken a knee, but it's clear that there was an exponential increase in the number of players who were doing this weekend in response to Trump's comments. And there's two ways to look at it. You can say, well, he did this. He picked this fight because he's more comfortable with a culture war attack in the midst of a series of legislative defeats. Right? I mean, his agenda has been stalled in Congress in an embarrassing way.
Yep.
You can have the opposition block you, but when you control both chambers and you try to pursue a piece of legislation 3 or 4 times and you can't get your own people together to vote for it, that's an embarrassing series of legislative defeats. And so you can say, okay, he wanted to change the topic. But the other way of looking at it is that this is just his comfort zone, right? And I think we've seen this from long before he ever, walked down that or came down that golden escalator and announced his candidacy. he likes picking fights with people, and he likes picking fights especially with women and people of color who stand up to him. And this has been something that's been consistent, again, for a long time.
So this has been, in your view, his MO. And the distraction to keep that 37, 34% of his, that base of his all riled and bunched up in the panties.
Exactly right. And I mean, also, look, he's getting a lot of criticism for the response to the absolute catastrophe that's happened in Puerto Rico.
He's had a response?
What's that?
He's had a response?
Well,
Other than
that it's that pathetic tweet where he blamed them for the debt, which he helped cause by his golf resort going belly up and leaving the island with $32 million in debt. But yeah, he's the government's response, the FEMA's response has gotten a lot of criticism, and he lost this election in Alabama, this primary campaign in Alabama. His boy went down to a pretty crushing defeat. So he started squawking at a time when he really wanted to talk about other things.
Yeah. But I look at Puerto Rico. Did you know it's an island in the middle of a really big ocean?
That's what I hear. But, I've also heard that there are these things, they're boats, and they can transport goods to Puerto Rico. Or in theory, I mean, we have this Jones Act, which is it's causing a lot of problems in that it doesn't allow foreign flag ships to deliver aid to Puerto Rico, and people in the Congress have called for it to be temporarily waived. The administration has refused to do so. It's a mess, and it's a disaster. And the thing is that there was a poll that showed that somewhere around half of Americans don't know that Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens, and it's like my savvier friends are like, of course Donald Trump knows this. And I'm sure that by now he does. But did he know that last week?
Well,
I'm not certain.
No, I don't believe he did. In fact, one of my
I don't
favorite...
know. I'm agnostic. Maybe he did. I mean, he had a golf course there. He must have interacted. But I don't take it as a given in the way that I would with pretty much any other politician.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Someone texted me a picture of his advisors showing him where the United States was on a globe. And here, this is Washington D.C. You are here. And the sad thing is while that may be a joke and it may seem funny and I fear that there's some reality in that.
I do too, and the other mess and very dangerous mess that I think he wanted to divert attention from is the heightening tensions on the Korean Peninsula. There was a group of military strategists who report in the Los Angeles Times. They did these war games, and some of them were saying, well, we conclude that there's about a 50% chance of a shooting war going off. There was a report in the Washington Post yesterday that North Korean leaders are going behind the scenes. They're trying to talk to Republican consultants in Washington to try to get them to explain Donald Trump to them.
Right.
What the hell he's doing here.
And
trying
when they
to
get
start
an answer,
a nuclear war on Twitter.
Right. When they get an answer, maybe they can tell the rest of us.
That's exactly what I tweeted.
No, just because, this is how, and look, you could say, well, he's being unpredictable. No, he's being dangerous. And the fear is look, if you can't find Puerto Rico on a map, how's he going to find North Korea?
Yeah, I mean, the people who are really these kind of diehard Trump supporters for whom, nothing can ever be a sign of problematic leadership, they buy that this is strategic uncertainty. So there is this thing where you're uncertain, intentionally unpredictable, right?
I get that.
And you do that to throw your opponent off as part of a calculated response. And the thing with Trump is, it's not just that he's unpredictable for Pyongyang or, his opponents. The people working around him in the White House don't know what he's going to do next. And that's not what you're supposed to be when you're trying. That's not strategic unpredictability. That's erratic governance.
Yeah,
there's a big difference.
I'm with you. No, look, he's shown us that he can't take a position and stay there for very long. I mean, I remember all of his secret plans. We got a secret plan for healthcare. It was a blank piece of paper. Time and time again, what he comes
remember
out.
his secret plan to destroy ISIS?
Yeah, where's that? Did I miss it?
I mean, he's pretty much continued the Obama approach, which was showing some success in terms of reclaiming territory from ISIS. And, he's good at taking credit for things that it doesn't seem like he can really rightly claim credit for.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. But I come back to this past weekend, which, to me was just one of these, really, this is, with all of the problems in the world, with all of the fact that nothing has gotten done, this is where we choose to stake our ground and have this long battle that he just can't seem to let go. In fact, I found out, what was it, last night they did their $250,000 per couple fundraiser in New York City, where, evidently he said that, again, to this, this crowd of multimillionaires, they should have suspended that Kaepernick for 2 games. And you go, really, you can't even let it go there?
No, I think he is genuinely obsessive. I think the American Psychological Association, they have this Goldwater rule. Psychologists are not supposed to diagnose public figures without examining them, and I can see why that is. But for me, Trump is clearly somebody who has serious clinical issues, right? I mean, there's no doubt that he has clinical narcissism, and narcissists cannot handle criticism, and they cannot handle any suggestion that they are not doing a remarkable or amazing job at whatever they're trying to do, and they tend to react to that with a mixture of depression and fury, and they lash out and they obsess over it, and I think that we see that on a regular basis. So he can't let anything go. He is still obsessed with his electoral college victory, because it cast doubt on his legitimacy. The fact that he lost the popular vote by 3 million votes cast doubt on his legitimacy, and that makes him crazy.
And look at this Russian investigation as well. Lots of questions about whether he actually won or if it was rigged.
Yeah, I mean, there is a big middle ground where there is an influence campaign, and it might be one of those situations, when we will find out, I think, where it was technically legal, but nonetheless shockingly wrong. And I think that some of Trump's defenders are trying to make that a single line. If it's not illegal, it's okay.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of things that are not illegal that are not okay, right? So,
well, this is the immoral party. I have no faith in them whatsoever to be moral and to try and skirt where they can. And I use the Roger Stone line. There's a lot of tricks in my bag. Treason isn't one of them. So that's the bar.
Yeah, that is the bar. I mean, yes, yeah, you put your finger on it. I think that the healthcare thing shows, if you want to talk about morality, I mean, they have bent over backwards to strip healthcare from 20, 23, 25 million Americans, and that group has skewed towards the low income people who really need the help. They want to do away with the Medicaid expansion, but they also want to cut Medicaid beyond the expansion, right? They want to cut the Graham Cassidy bill, like the one before it, would have cut, after 2026, would have cut Medicaid by over 30% because of a slower growth formula. And the consequences of that are just disastrous, and they don't seem to be at all sensitive towards the consequences.
Well, yeah, I mean, the reality is that it's not going to be them or their loved ones who will die because of it. Because look,
or their donors.
But
they're under a lot of pressure from their donors. I mean, there was a report, I believe it was in the New York Times, about how their donors are not contributing to the 2018 midterm cycle because they're so frustrated that they haven't been able to destroy Obamacare.
Yeah. Well, no, the Koch brothers, evidently came out and said, no money until we get the repeal, we get our tax cuts. You keep gutting the environment, till we get what we want. This is what we paid for, Josh.
Yeah, and I mean, we may end up. I don't want anybody to be complacent. We have to fight over these things, but it may be that they're too that they take such a maximalist position on taxes that they can't get that done either. That they propose something that drives deficits up so high and cuts services so deeply that that they lose 3 senators again. People who understand that they'll face not only electoral consequences, but that their states will be completely screwed, and that their constituents will be screwed. And it's possible that they can't get it together for tax reform, and that's the time to really pop the popcorn when it comes to the GOP civil war and the donors freaking out, etc.
Yeah, last question I've got for you, in looking at this past weekend's event, do we see this going forward, and do we see a refocusing of what the protest was really about? Because look, I think in all of this, the actual message that Kaepernick was trying to send in a very peaceful protest kind of way has been lost in all of the Trump back and forth.
Well, when you say it's been lost, that implies that it was natural. Trump and his conservative allies have gone out of their way to change the focus and to make it appear that this was a protest. I mean, how many times have you seen a protest against the national anthem or a protest against the flag? It's ridiculous, but they have done a good job with their allies in the conservative media of reframing what the protests were about. I hope that this will continue, and that people will understand where it's coming from. I don't know that, we live increasingly in our little silos, our media silos. I'm not sure that any of that is going to puncture the bubble of a typical Trump supporter. Bob Costas had this very eloquent little video clip on Sunday, and he talked about what the protests were about and the moral cause behind them. And I was watching it and I was thinking, on the one hand, it would be amazing if, because Bob Costas isn't a political figure, he comes from the world of sports media, maybe this would penetrate some of these Trump supporters. Maybe their defenses would be down. But then I realized conservatives think ESPN has a liberal bias.
Yep.
So.
No, when I saw that, I immediately tweeted out that now a conservative will see this and propose legislation that we have to stand for the national anthem before every event of our life. Going to the movies, going to school, going to the bathroom, national anthem everywhere, and you must stand. I'm waiting for that.
Yeah, well, free speech week, right?
There you go. Joshua, I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you, buddy.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
Thanks so much, Joshua Holland. You want to check out some of his stuff, we'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. Fantastic writer over there at the Nation and Rolling Stone. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show for working people.
One thing to remember when you're climbing to the top, you'd better know the way back down. I can't believe you'd really stumble, and I always knew you'd fall. It seems so easy to say I knew.
From New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross is in China this week and said he hopes to present very good deliverables during an upcoming visit by President Trump in November. That is code for deals. China's premier also had kind words for the cameras, saying the world's largest democracy and the world's biggest developed country had a lot in common. But make no mistake about it, trade relations with China are highly political. President Trump has strained relations in recent weeks by accusing China of doing little to rein in North Korea. Earlier this summer, he also launched an investigation into China's theft of American intellectual property, which U.S. businesses say costs them billions of dollars and allows Chinese firms to innovate without spending on R&D. Just 2 weeks ago, Trump took the further step of blocking the purchase of California-based Lattice Semiconductor by a Chinese investment firm. In an executive order, Trump said that handing over control of the American semiconductor industry to China, quote, threatens to impair the national security of the United States. Chinese leader didn't mention that decision this week, saying only that they hope the U.S. would make it easier for Chinese firms to do business on American soil. And voters in Iraqi Kurdistan have voted for independence from Baghdad. Initial results are trickling in after Monday's referendum, with more than 90% of voters choosing a break from Baghdad. But the path to actual independence will be challenging. The Iraqi government maintains the vote is unconstitutional, while the more immediate threat may come from Turkish President Recep Erdogan. Erdogan said Tuesday that if Kurds don't give up their fight for independence, he'd shut down an oil pipeline that generates much of Kurdistan's revenue, as well as stop food delivery trucks from crossing the border. Turkey worries independence for Iraqi Kurds will spur a similar independence push among Turkey's Kurdish population. For more global news headlines, visit TalkMediaNews.com.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
My email of the day. This religion obsession is scaring the you-know-what out of me. I don't know what's scarier, being eaten by someone or having them pray for me. In Sharia law, Christian Sharia law world, I think the praying part could be just as scary. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. You can also email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So remember when the Republicans took over, said they were going to be the party of fiscal responsibility. They were going to have good governance. Wait a minute. They didn't say anything about good governance. They would tear the government down, restrain them. Nothing for government. Yet all we see is Mnuchin and Price flying all over the place, or wanting to fly all over the place in private planes. And now you find out that Scott Pruitt, head of the Environmental Protection Agency, has evidently requested his own, he's requested his own security detail. Got to have 24/7 coverage because you know what? He's the important guy. And he wants his own soundproof booth. Now, you have, Secretary of State, the President, head of the Department of Defense, people who are dealing in national security issues. They have this thing called a SCIF, and I'm sure you've heard of this. It's the Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility. It's basically a soundproof phone booth. That's really what it is. It's basically a phone booth that nobody can hear anything outside of it, and it has a dedicated line that is, is highly secured. Evidently, the head of the EPA wants this for his department. Now you go, well, why? Why would the head of the EPA need this kind of highly secure, highly, detached communications, and highly secure communications network? And I can only come to the conclusion of that. Look, you're talking with really important people like the Koch brothers about, environmental policy that's going to benefit, the handful at the expense of the rest of us. Because it was interesting that the person, one of the people who worked for the company who was going to provide this, told the Washington Post that the main goal was to establish a secure phone booth that couldn't be breached from a data point of view or from someone standing outside the door eavesdropping. And you go, why don't you just close the door? 25 grand? Really? So that you can have a private phone booth to tell a handful of people how you're going to harm the rest of us? Seems kind of wasteful spending. And Walter Schraub, you may know the name, former director of the Office of government ethics. He tweeted out in a very tongue-in-cheek kind of way. Vote now. Either EPA Administrator Maxwell Smart installs cone of silence in office, or EPA Chief channels Howard Hughes. Make your choice. Thanks for tuning in today. We'll see you back here tomorrow. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you get the podcast. Love to hear your thoughts. Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email Rick at thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like the tidal flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming.